Welcome back to Reviews with Elaine, because I have opinions, and I'm super excited today because today's opinions will be about Into the Broken Land by Tanya Huff. This is a new book by my favorite author, and I've been waiting years. It's been forever since she's had a new book, especially a new fantasy book. So needless to say, I was super excited to receive this in the mail about a week ago. Now sadly, I was reading another book at the time, so I had to quickly speed through that one and write a review so that I could finally read Into the Broken Lands! So I read absolutely nothing about this book before I launched into it because I really love books to be a surprise. And turns out this book is a little bit like Annihilation, the movie, but fantasy! Which I'm 100% behind because I absolutely loved that movie, and my only qualm with it was I wanted more time exploring the creepy alien but earthly landscape. And this book has like 300 pages of exploring this creepy but not unfamiliar landscape. So, story here. A couple of hundred years ago, the mages that lived in the north part of this country all start a war with each other. And this war shattered the land, the cities, and the people who lived there. Untold thousands died, but 5,000 people followed a woman named Captain Marson down the Mage Road to build a new home on the edge of a lake. Now, the heir of Marson has to make the journey back north, into the Broken Lands, to retrieve the fuel for the Black Flame, the symbol of their people's strength. The first time the journey was accomplished, half of those sent died. Ryan, heir of Marson, now just prays that he can make it there and back. His only real chance of survival actually lies with Nani, the last of the great mage-crafted weapons, who is still mourning the healer who was the first person to acknowledge that she was more than just a weapon. So I really loved this book. I especially love the themes of humanity and free will, and not just because they happen to exactly mirror a theme of a book that I'm writing right now. Like, literally, I'm working on a project that has those themes exactly, and when I was reading it, I was like, oh my god, me and Tanya Huff are on the same wavelength. That must mean good things. But also, I love the way Tanya Huff interweaved her themes into this book. So yeah, this book does follow two separate timelines. Now, when Ryan is making his trip for the fuel, and then when Garrett, his great-great-uncle, was making his trip. The then timeline actually starts surprisingly late in the book. Like, usually when you're dealing with a book that has separate timelines, it's either a direct back and forth, like chapter 1 is one timeline, chapter 2 is the second timeline, chapter 3 is the first timeline, chapter 4 is the second, etc. Or you're dealing with entire chunks of the book. So like the first third of the book is in 1887 and the second chunk of the book is in 1893 and the third chunk is back in 1897, whatever. But this book sort of doesn't do it either way. There is back and forth, but it's not a one-to-one chapter thing. And also, the then doesn't start until like almost 100 pages into the book. And at first that felt a little bit wrong, like it felt like a mistake, but the more I read I was like, no, this is completely correct, because it allows us to establish the theme. Now, what it does specifically is it allows us to see who Nani is in the current timeline before we get to see what she was in the past. And very importantly here, we see who she was before we see what she looks like. It made her the heart of the novel before we even really discovered that she was different. And it evoked a lot more empathy than it would have otherwise. Like, we felt what was missing when we finally jumped back to the sections with Garrett, that we would not have felt if this was just where we started from. And there's also just a lot more of the now timeline than there is of the then. And this made it feel a bit more like a story within a story, rather than a separate timeline. We don't see all of Garrett's journey. We see the bits that are relevant to Ryan's journey, which also plays into themes of lost history, censorship, and what history is important to maintain. But both the late start for the then sections and the relative sparsity in the book make it hella impressive how deeply I managed to get attached to Garrett and Ariana. Especially Ariana, because her death literally marks the beginning of the book. Like, this is not a spoiler. She dies in chapter 1. And that is usually something that really does not work for me. Like, I hate it when authors tell me how a character is going to end before the book even starts. It leaves me wondering, why the hell am I bothering reading this if I already know what's going to happen? But it did not have that effect in this book. And I think part of that is just because I love Tanya Huff's characters. She is an author who really takes the time to build characters, even for minor roles. And her characters are innately likable. They tend to be inherently good people. Flawed, but their flaws are softer, gentler things. Like they are running from their terrible past, or they are full of shame for something that they have no control over, or they are single-minded to the point of obsession, or they are too willing to follow a charismatic leader. These are very human flaws, and flaws that allow the characters to still always mean well and to try to do what was right, but to still fail. And most of the characters in this book fit this category exactly. Ryan lacks all faith in himself because he is replacing brothers that spent his entire childhood telling him he was nothing, but he's more than willing to do his duty, even if that kills him. Garrett is arrogant and stuck in his way of thinking, but will do anything to protect his people. Ariana is stubborn and pushy, but she's determined to help people. Nani is a gentle giant who knows she can never connect with anyone because of her inhuman appearance. Then there's Lily. Fucking Lily. I was going to say that Lily is the only time I've ever seen Tanya Huff put a unlikable character as the POV character. But no, there are bits of the Quartered series that the creepy necromancer character is the POV character. But even though he is downright indisputably evil, he is also weirdly likable. So maybe Lily still is the only unlikable character that's ever been a POV character in Tanya Huff's books. But Lily, she is arrogant, she is power hungry, she is completely lacking in empathy, and she is downright cruel. I knew Tanya Huff did not want me to like her when she referenced pretty early on that this girl may have killed a cat as a child. And yet, Tanya Huff still tries to make Lily understandable. And she is right more often than not. Though a lot of these moments when she's right are clearly set up as a way of showing us there's a huge difference between right and right. But she was like the trolley problem as a person. Just because it is the logical answer does not mean it's the morally correct one. And I mean, spoilers here, sort of spoilers, kind of spoilers, but Lily's descent into evil, not really a surprise here. And because we see the inside of her story, it's less of a descent and more of a reveal. We know the evil was always there. And even though I found her irritating, I'm still intrinsically very glad that there are sections of this book from her point of view. Because I don't think the ending would have felt as earned or as emotional otherwise. I did hate her for the majority of the book, but there are just enough really likable moments that I mourned her with Ryan and the others. It put us directly in the emotions in a way that wouldn't have worked if I had just had this entire book from Ryan or Nani's point of view. And here's another one of my favorite things about Tanya Huff's books. Even though there are huge portions of this book from the perspective of a frankly psychotic bitch, it is still fun, light, and playful. The characters have fun, they make jokes, they love, they share deep friendships, and they have hope. The world is literally trying to kill them every few steps, and they find ways to keep laughing. Hell, Keaton, who is by far my favorite character in this book, dropped what may be my favorite joke I've ever read in any book ever. You know why no one goes to the bathroom in books? Because it makes the pages stick together. And besides being just exactly my kind of sense of humor, this really does help with the emotional stakes. I know there are some people who say that having jokes right next to the big emotional moments cuts the tension and undercuts the power of emotional scenes. But I think if anything, it does the exact opposite. It lifts you up so that you can feel the drop. Keaton's jokes are what make him such a likable character, which is what makes the moments he's in danger so much more heart-wrenching. Every time he was doing something stupid, and yes, most of the times he was in danger, it was because he was doing something stupid, I was holding my breath being like, Tanya Huff, don't you dare kill him. Like, I am trusting you. And I had to hold my breath because Tanya Huff is an author who will kill really likable characters. And I think that's also a really good thing. To me, what does undercut emotional moments and emotional scenes is when you know that the characters aren't going to die. Like Supernatural, the TV show, it completely lost its appeal to me after the leads had died like 4 times and it lacked any meaning anymore. And this book did bring out big emotions in me. There are character deaths, and some of them hit like a fucking truck. Some of these deaths are actually quite gruesome, and Huff does not shy away from employing all the senses to show the horror of what's happening. But even beyond the death, there's also like a lot of heavy stuff in the book. You mourn the lost knowledge, you mourn the people who are lost in the Mage Wars, and even the relationships that cannot ever be. There is legitimate weight to the questions of what defines greater good, what exactly is worth sacrificing for the pursuit of knowledge, and what is worth dying for. I'm always amazed at Tanya Huff's ability to make me cry. When, if asked, I would define her books primarily as fun. They are, but there's a soul to her books. She manages to balance really serious topics with a joy that makes me want to revisit her works over and over again. But this gets me thinking, why do I love this author so much? I mean, she's not exceptionally well known. She's not the kind of author that wins all the awards ever. She's not the kind of author people write their theses about. And I don't fucking care. I love everything she's ever written. Even the books that slip well past the point of just being a bit odd and go straight into the weird zone. And I think that part of that is because we share so many of the same sensibilities. She likes the same balance of dark elements to a light tone. She writes the witty, sassy, playful characters that I love. She likes to play with different kinds of relationships, many of them not heteronormative, and she avoids the drama llama romance tropes that I absolutely hate. Most of her characters' relationships are emotionally healthy, or they are working towards emotionally healthy. And I think in the end, it comes down to the writing. Tanya Huff, on first glance, seems to be a very commercial author. There's not much literary here, but that's just at first glance. My advisor in college, Annabelle Davis Goff, talked about what she called moments of art in writing. She used a moment in Robinson Crusoe as her example, the moment when he first finds a footprint on his presumably deserted island. The funny thing is, while I always understood what she was talking about, I don't see the art in that moment. Like, to me, it felt pretty utilitarian, and the writing was as unnecessarily precise as the rest of the damn book. But Tanya Huff? Yeah, I see moments of art all the time in her books. No matter how silly the scene, there are moments of mirroring, of lines that hide a deeper metaphor, of images that perfectly encapsulate the feeling of the scene, of delightfully turned foreshadowing. I tend to notice them more on reread, and yeah, I do reread Tanya Huff's books a lot, but even on first read I'll find them. I'll often end up stopping in the middle of what I'm reading, go back like 20 pages, because I'm delighted to see how that segment, like 20 pages before, fit into the greater story. And I saw that a lot in this book. There's a scene with a cleansing of a fountain that mirrors something that will happen literally 400 pages further along. The way the two narratives tease each other is utterly beautifully and artfully done. I love it. Now, the downside of that is I do feel that there are some moments that I can feel there is something there on first read, but I can't actually find it because I don't have the rest of the story in my mind yet. And that occasionally leaves me feeling confused and like something should have been edited. Like, honestly, the section about the fountain I actually had to read twice before I figured out what was going on. And there are a lot more moments like this in her later books than in her earlier books. I suspect because the editor trusts her more than they did when she started out. But It is a bit of a downside if you're just launching into the book and don't know the author, and therefore may not trust her enough to keep reading. She is an author I always feel like I can read while doing something else, because like I love reading while a TV is running in the background, but I actually can't. She actually does need my full attention, but I have to remind myself of that because her writing feels so smooth and easy. Until it suddenly doesn't, and I'm flipping back going, wait, what the hell happened? I missed something. But I'm not sure that's a bug. I'm pretty sure that's a feature. Beyond that, the only negative thing I have to say about this book is, Tanya Huff, which academic hurt you? Because this is the second book of yours that I've read where academics are just way too wrapped up in their own arrogance. Like, to the point of risking people's lives because they think their work is more important than anything else in the universe. And I mean, yeah, there really are arrogant academics out there. Hell, my advisor from college that I mentioned earlier, I'm pretty sure she would downright disown me if she ever heard me saying that I actually prefer reading light commercial fantasy over Daniel Defoe. But I'm pretty sure she wouldn't have risked my life on the point. Probably. Maybe. I hope. But yeah, to anyone who's not Annabelle Davis Goff, I encourage you to read this book. I absolutely fucking loved it.